Hello and welcome to Lists and Other Things That No One Asked For with Jesse Barbin, your weekly mini podcast with essays and lists about music, TV, books, and in general, the painful process of growing up. Thank you for tuning in. I have a lot of pet peeves when it comes to movies, and I think the main reason is I'm getting older and I don't eat nearly enough vegetables and my time is quickly running out. I don't want to waste any of my fleeting, precious time, especially not on movies that are dumb. And so many movies nowadays are dumb. I can scroll through the limitless content on one of my streaming services, and most of the big movies are not great. One of the things that will make me immediately hate a movie is terrible, cliche dialogue. If a villain says to the hero, "We're not so different, you and I'm done." When I hear that, I know the writer wasn't trying very hard. They're just dumping in the usual movie villain dialogue filler, which I, sir, have no time for. Another thing that causes me to shut a movie off is when, in the context of some romantic subplot, one character says to another, "I've seen the way you look at her/him." What does that even mean? It's usually just for one character to point out to another character that they're madly in love, but they just don't see it. Or, conversely, that they know someone else doesn't love someone else anymore, and it's very sad. All I know is there has to be a better way to say that. Do better, people writing big movies. The most egregious... Is egregious too big a word? Does that make me sound pretentious? Anyway, the most egregious movie cliche is the summary speech. This is where a character basically blurts out the thesis of the movie with no attempt at metaphor or subtlety. Sometimes it's a voiceover, sometimes it's a conversation between some characters. Here's an example. Not necessarily a great one. Super 8 is a science fiction movie by J.J. Abrams. Yes, J.J. Abrams has a spotty track record, but this was an example that sprung to mind. It's the story of Joe, a kid who is mourning the death of his mother, who makes friends with a giant alien who crash-landed to Earth and was experimented on by the government. Both the alien and Joe are very sad, see? It all comes to a head at the climax of the movie because there's a misunderstanding and the alien has Joe in its alien fist and is about to squish him when Joe blurts out, "I know bad things happen. Bad things happen, but you can still live. You're gonna be okay." Do you get it now? Are your tears jerked? Joe and the alien are the same. You can get over bad things that happen to you. The alien allows Joe to escape and everything is cool. But here's the thing. I could have put all that together myself. I don't need the summary speech. It's entirely unnecessary. Sometimes, and to be even more on the nose, the summary speech is even an actual speech, where a character in the movie has a chance to actually give a speech within the plot of the movie. In this case, I think of Legally Blonde, and I feel sorry for picking on Legally Blonde, but where Reese Witherspoon's character, having overcome lots of hot person discrimination, is now giving a speech at her graduation, and she caps it off with this nonsense. "We take our next steps into the world, remembering that first impressions are not always correct." See, blondes can be smart. Movie accomplished. It's like when you needed filler in a school paper and to reach the page limit and you've already messed with the margins and the font, so you toss in a trusty old, "So in conclusion," and then you say some of the stuff you already said, all while chipping away at that page requirement. I'm sure this has been said before and better by someone else, and these probably aren't great examples, and neither of these are especially great movies, but what I'm trying to say is that I'm seeing the summary speech in a lot of mainstream movies and even some TV shows, and it's wholly unnecessary. People who watch TV and movies are sometimes smart. You don't have to spoon feed them. I'll list you some movies that don't have speeches. These are also probably my favorite movies. Number 1, Napoleon Dynamite. And full disclaimer, I went to college in small-town Idaho, and so Napoleon Dynamite is also famously set in small-town Idaho, in a small potato town, so that might be part of why I like it so much, but only a small part. What I really like is it sidesteps the tendency for a teen movie to have some kind of speech. I mean, Pedro gives a speech, but it's just a speech within the context of his run for studie body president, and not doubling as a way to summarize the thesis of the movie for the audience. He's just legit giving a speech. I think he finishes his speech and says what Napoleon told him to say earlier, which is, "If you vote for me, all your wildest dreams will come true." I don't believe him until John Heder does his famous dance. This is how to cap off a movie. No speechin', just dancing. Number 2, Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. This is a weird one, I know. I watched it during the first few months of pandemic lockdown and it moved me, I guess. It was a stressful time. It's an underdog story where Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams play a band who's trying to win the, wait for it, Eurovision Song Contest. They're going up to play their final performance and Will Ferrell's character says, the perfect song isn't the winning song, but a song that comes from the heart. And then Rachel McAdams sings the thesis of the movie. It's beautiful, and it's a bit speechy and on the nose, but at least it's a song and not a ham-fisted speech. This is going great. Serenity, number 3. This is a continuation of the TV show Firefly, and it had all the sci-fi, western, and zombie action I dreamed it would. At the climax of this particular movie, as he leads his crew into what might possibly be their doom, Captain Malcolm Reynolds charismatically declares, I aim to misbehave. And then they go in and waste a bunch of space zombies and save free will for the whole galaxy, etc. Full disclaimer, I thought this was all the speech entailed originally, but when I went back and watched this scene to write this, it turns out he says a bunch more stuff, like, as sure as I know anything, I know this. The evil space empire will try again. A year from now, 10 years, they'll swing back to the belief that they can make people better, and I do not hold to that. So no more running. So actually, it does have a bit more of a summary speech, so scratch Serenity from this list, and maybe this negates my whole argument I'm making, and I don't really know what I'm talking about. Maybe Napoleon Dynamite is the only good example. This is my bad. There are lots of others, I just can't think of them right now. I'm not claiming to be some type of movie genius. I'm a guy with opinions. None of these examples are remotely recent. Okay, maybe here's another example. Number 4, Amélie. It's a French rom-com. And instead of summarizing the thesis, which I think is weird people can find love too, which I think that's the thesis of Amélie. Instead of telling you that in a speech, they just shows Amélie and Nino, I think his name is, riding away on a scooter. And that's as good as you're going to get, I think. My other movie pet peeve is when a movie goes over 2 hours. No movie is so good that it needs to go on longer than 2 hours. Edit, people. Learn to edit. Thank you for listening to Lists and other things that no one asked for. I post a new episode every Monday. If you prefer reading, this is also available as a Substack. You can find me on social media at Jesse Barbin. See you next week.